a report that there was an intercepted communication between the US Navy and the pilot of MH370.
A mysterious letter just surfaced, allegedly written by a rescued passenger of Malaysian Flight 370. Inside, it was a single blank image that, once decoded, revealed something no one was supposed to find out. Let's uncover what that hidden message really said. The vanishing. The story begins on the night of March 8, 2014, a night that would become one of the most haunting enigmas in modern aviation history. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, a Boeing 777-200ER, departed Kuala Lumpur International Airport just after midnight, bound for Beijing with 239 souls aboard. Among them was Philip Wood, a 50-year-old American IBM executive who had recently moved to China for work. He was described by his partner, Sarah Baik, as a man of compassion, intelligence, and calm, a person with a quantum connection to life itself, she once said. At 1:19 a.m., 40 minutes into the flight, air traffic control in Kuala Lumpur made its final routine contact. The voice of the co-pilot, Farik Abdul Hamid, came through.
All right, good night.
A short, unremarkable farewell that would become infamous. Within minutes, Flight 370's transponder went dark. It vanished from civilian radar screens as if it had never existed. In the early morning confusion, no distress calls were received. Air traffic control initially assumed a communication failure, a technical glitch perhaps, but as hours passed, it became clear the plane was gone. At dawn, search and rescue operations began over the South China Sea, the expected flight path. Aircraft from Malaysia, Vietnam, and Singapore combed the waters. Nothing was found. Then, days later, a chilling announcement: the Malaysian military had tracked MH370 turning sharply west, back across the Malay Peninsula before disappearing over the Andaman Sea. The world began to understand that this wasn't a simple accident. Someone, or something, had taken control of the aircraft. Among the passengers was Philip Wood, the only American on board. A Texas native, Wood had built a career in advanced data storage at IBM. He'd recently relocated to Beijing for a 2-year posting and was flying home from Kuala Lumpur to reunite with his partner. To friends, Philip was reliable, meticulous. The idea of him being on a missing aircraft felt surreal. In the days that followed, Wood's family clung to the same desperate hope as hundreds of others, that the passengers had survived somewhere. That hope seemed to die as week after week, the Indian Ocean yielded nothing. No wreckage, no signals, no trace. Then, on March 19, 2014, 11 days after the disappearance, a post appeared online that would change everything. It was uploaded to the notorious internet forum 4chan under an anonymous user ID. The post included a pitch-black photograph accompanied by a short, frantic message. "I have been held hostage by unknown military personnel after my flight was hijacked, blindfolded. I work for IBM and I have managed to hide my cell phone. I have been separated from the rest of the passengers and I am in a cell. My name is Philip Wood. I think I have been drugged as well and cannot think clearly." Attached to the photo were GPS coordinates embedded in its metadata, placing the image near Diego Garcia, a remote island in the Indian Ocean operated jointly by the US and UK militaries. When these coordinates were extracted, users began to panic. Could it be real? The story exploded across forums and conspiracy sites. Philip Wood's name, until then one among 239, became the focus of global obsession. If true, the implications were staggering. Diego Garcia was no ordinary island. A heavily fortified airbase in the middle of the Indian Ocean, it had long been associated with secretive US operations, drone deployments, surveillance flights, and rumored detentions. The idea that MH370 could have been diverted there wasn't new, but now it seemed to have proof. The alleged photo's XIF data pinpointed the location within a few hundred meters of the base perimeter. Online researchers noticed the image was completely black, but that, they argued, made sense. If Wood had been imprisoned in a dark cell, he may have taken the photo without flash to avoid detection. A pattern began to form. Maybe, theorists suggested, the plane had been commandeered, not crashed. Some pointed to the presence of 20 Freescale semiconductor employees on board, engineers working on advanced microchips potentially valuable for defense applications.
This is important. Planes fly into Beijing and it's actually loaded up with 20 semiconductor engineers that are connected to a US aerospace defense or US defense company.
Could they have been the target? Others linked the mystery to intercepted communications allegedly picked up between MH370 and US naval vessels in the area.
A report that there was an intercepted communication between the US Navy and the pilot of MH370 saying that the plane was disintegrating in attempting an emergency landing.
If those reports were genuine and the letter authentic, then MH370 hadn't crashed at all. It had been seized, silenced, and hidden. Aviation analysts, accustomed to dealing in hard data, were suddenly faced with something emotional, a human message from the void. For weeks, the alleged Philip Wood message was debated by journalists, skeptics, and believers alike. Some claimed the story was impossible. How could a man hide a cell phone through a hijacking, days of captivity, and post from within a classified base? Others countered that such disbelief was exactly what a cover-up relied upon. Independent blogs dissected the photo's metadata, noting that it contained GPS coordinates corresponding exactly to Diego Garcia, 7.316197, 72.426544, the kind of detail most people wouldn't know how to fake. This, combined with the image's timestamp, March 18, 2014, 10:49 UTC, fueled speculation that Wood had managed to send a final proof-of-life message before being silenced. It was, many thought, the smoking gun. In Texas, the Wood family watched helplessly as their loved one's name circulated through tabloids and conspiracy channels. To them, it was unthinkable, both that he could be alive somewhere and that his identity was being hijacked by the internet. His partner, Sarah Baj, expressed anguish mixed with reluctant hope. In interviews, she said she still believed the plane's disappearance involved intentional actions, possibly an intentional cover-up, but she stopped short of endorsing the Diego Garcia claim, emphasizing her grief rather than conspiracy. Still, for the public, the idea that someone from MH370 might be alive was intoxicating. Soon after the message's appearance, amateur investigators began tracing Philip Wood's supposed digital footprints. On Twitter, accounts claimed to have found network pings near Diego Garcia. On Reddit, users posted analyses of the image's metadata, showing that the iPhone model listed matched Wood's own. A YouTube user named Ashton Forbes, later featured in multiple podcast interviews, argued that the US government's silence was proof of guilt.
If you say it's national security, you can justify practically anything. This is what concerns me. And Obama waited 11 days to talk about it.
This was a global tragedy.
That to me is just weird. Like, that screams we gotta come up with a cover story.
Within weeks, MH370's story had transformed from a tragedy into a labyrinth of secrecy. Meanwhile, official search efforts expanded across millions of square kilometers of ocean. By April 2014, ships equipped with sonar scoured the southern Indian Ocean, thousands of miles from Diego Garcia. Malaysia, Australia, and China led the international task force. But to those following the Philip Wood story, that search seemed deliberately misdirected. Why were they searching the Southern Ocean when the message pointed northwest to a US base? Independent commentators compared satellite pings from the aircraft to possible redirections toward the Indian Ocean's central regions, speculating that radar and Inmarsat data had been falsified. Some insisted that military-grade technology had cloaked MH370 from detection, redirecting it to Diego Garcia. As the theory gained traction, videos claiming to show military drones capturing MH370's disappearance mid-air began circulating online.
We are looking at one of those windows. So somebody has popped open a window and they're watching the plane, tracking the plane on this huge battle map.
Of all the commercial aircraft in...
For believers, this footage, paired with the letter, became undeniable proof of something monumental, a suppressed military experiment or an encounter beyond known physics. Weeks turned into months. The world moved on. The story drifted toward the realm of myth. Yet for many, that single message, "I am being held hostage," echoed louder than any official report. Theories proliferated. Some claimed Wood had been rescued by intelligence insiders, but forced into silence under classified restrictions. Others believed he died on the island after sending the message. In one especially chilling thread, users speculated that his phone, an iPhone 5, had been deliberately wiped by authorities once located through its IMEI number. Every detail became a clue. The missing altitude tag in the photo's metadata, the slightly corrupted timestamp format, the presence of a Picasa software trace, suggesting someone had resaved the image after the fact. Depending on interpretation, these could be signs of manipulation or signs of panic from a man trying to transmit proof under duress. The internet couldn't agree. By the summer of 2014, the rescued passenger narrative had taken firm hold across YouTube, alternative media, and fringe journalism. One blog declared MH370 did not crash, it was confiscated. Influencers and independent filmmakers began producing documentaries arguing the Diego Garcia angle. Forums compiled detailed satellite maps, timing data, and eyewitness testimonies, such as a woman in the Maldives who claimed to have seen a low-flying jumbo jet heading southwest the morning after the disappearance. Although debunked later, these accounts fed into a growing collective conviction that the official story was false and that somewhere a survivor had cried for help through digital static. In late 2014, the frenzy reached its peak. Investigators began to methodically analyze the Philip Wood image and its XEF data. At the same time, mainstream media began to question the theory. Was it possible? Could a man have smuggled a phone through a hijacking, survived imprisonment, and sent a coded cry from a classified military base? The hidden island. New fragments of the MH370 timeline were emerging. Malaysian officials confirmed that after the last good night transmission, the plane's transponder had been manually disabled. Military radar then tracked it as it flew west, crossing back over Malaysia and then northwest toward the Andaman Sea. Some analysts suggested that whoever controlled the plane knew exactly how to remain undetected, switching between radar zones at the seams of national airspace. This precision inspired more speculation. Could a civilian pilot have executed such maneuvers, or did the jet fall under external control? To believers, the answer was obvious. They cited American radar networks, over-the-horizon surveillance systems like Australia's Dawn Array, and naval exercises allegedly active in the region that night.
And all these radars were supposedly turned off that night, these critical defense radars. I mean, the excuses are just unbelievable.
The implication, only a coordinated military operation could have suppressed so many systems at once. Theorists tied this to the letter, arguing that Wood's captivity was part of a controlled seizure of the plane itself. They cross-referenced flight paths with Diego Garcia's radar range, claiming that a diverted Boeing could have approached the island undetected from the northwest. Some insisted that U.S. naval satellites, referenced in the NROL-22 tag seen in alleged drone footage, had tracked the operation in real time. As the internet fractured into believer camps, one voice became central: Ashton Forbes.
Yeah, I mean, it's aviation's biggest mystery ever. I mean, and it's the last plane to go missing, actually, even now in 2025.
He argued that leaked U.S. military drone videos showed hypersonic plasma orbs encircling a plane before it vanished. Evidence, he claimed, of teleportation or advanced energy weaponry. To most scientists, these ideas sounded impossible. Yet to the millions who had watched governments issue contradiction after contradiction, they resonated. The footage appeared authentic, grainy, infrared, stamped with military-style overlays. One video even displayed geographic coordinates that roughly aligned with the Nicobar Islands, an area consistent with MH370's last radar trace. If genuine, that meant someone had filmed the plane's final moments.
So why can they create a perfect triangle like that? Because it's magnet inversion, positive and minus magnetic or electromagnetic charge, and it creates an equilibrium, and they're just locking into a certain equilibrium. So how would you pull something like this off? Well, you would use some kind of fly-by-wire, advanced, almost AI, computer-based system for flight navigation. And then they spin around the plane.
Forbes's interpretation was bold. The plane hadn't crashed. It had been teleported, relocated through a classified energy experiment gone wrong. The US government, he argued, suppressed this because acknowledging it would expose technologies capable of manipulating space-time. The claim's allure lay in its scale. It reframed MH370 not as an accident or crime, but as the first public glimpse of physics far beyond public knowledge. In this context, Philip Wood's letter became not just a plea for rescue, but the human footprint of a forbidden technology. Believers found reinforcement in history. They recalled projects like the alleged Philadelphia experiment, whispers of stealth ships and radar invisibility, Cold War rumors of teleportation physics. On fringe forums, they compiled government documents, some real, some misinterpreted, such as defense intelligence reference documents on traversable wormholes, stargates, and negative energy. To them, these papers validated Forbes's narrative. If wormholes were being studied, why not tested? Mainstream investigators investigators, however, remained focused on oceanic search zones. In early 2015, joint teams from Australia and Malaysia concluded that the plane had turned south after its last radar contact and flown for nearly 7 more hours until fuel exhaustion. Using Inmarsat satellite handshakes, they plotted arcs of possible locations across the southern Indian Ocean. Search vessels scanned 120,000 square kilometers of seafloor, an area the size of New York State. They found nothing. To conspiracy audiences, that absence was proof of redirection. If the plane had crashed there, surely some debris would have appeared. Instead, silence. Then, in mid-2015, a wing flaperon washed ashore on Réunion Island, more than 4,000 kilometers west of the official search zone. French investigators confirmed it belonged to MH370. The finding divided believers. Some saw it as evidence of a cover-up, planted wreckage to reinforce the Southern Ocean narrative. Others suggested that if the plane had truly been transported to Diego Garcia, debris could have been deliberately released to mislead. In countless videos, digital cartographers drew arrows from Diego Garcia to Réunion, simulating ocean currents. They argued that a controlled release from the base could account for the debris drift time. Their graphics filled screens with red paths and timestamps, presented with documentary gravitas. Meanwhile, a quieter community of analysts pursued technical validation of the Philip Wood image. Enthusiasts downloaded the photo from archives and ran it through metadata viewers. They pointed to fields like make, Apple iPhone 5 and GPS latitude 7.316197, longitude 72.426544. They saw this as incontrovertible, but skeptics noticed discrepancies: missing altitude, data, inconsistent timestamp formatting, traces of Google Picasa software. For most professionals, these were telltale signs of manipulation, yet those counter-arguments were drowned out by louder, more cinematic claims. Online, even the smallest fragment took on mythic significance. One user claimed that US military cargo planes had been observed departing Diego Garcia shortly after MH370 vanished. Another referenced Catherine T., a witness who reported a glowing aircraft near the Nicobar Islands.
She sees a massive jumbo jet with a glowing kind of orange tinge around it, haze around it, with dark smoke coming out of the back of it, flying very low.
Her testimony, though unverified, was repeated endlessly as corroboration that the plane had remained intact long after official radar contact ceased. By 2016, the Diego Garcia rescue narrative had solidified into a parallel history of MH370. Documentaries with millions of views narrated the event as a military interception gone wrong. Comment sections filled with calculations, fuel endurance, air corridor distances, radar coverage cones. Theorists quoted every inconsistency in official timelines, from mismatched transponder logs to unaccounted minutes between satellite handshakes. Throughout it all, the letter remained the emotional core. It was cited in nearly every conspiracy video, often read aloud over somber music. I have been held hostage. To audiences fatigued by silence from governments, it sounded authentic. It was personal, frightened, human. In 2017, as wreckage pieces accumulated, parts recovered from Mozambique, Madagascar, Tanzania, and South Africa, the alternate narrative began to waver. Oceanographic drift analyses showed that all debris trajectories pointed back to a crash site in the southern Indian Ocean, far from Diego Garcia. But by then, the myth had gained a decade of momentum. By 2020, new technologies gave the legend fresh oxygen. Artificial intelligence enhancements of the black photograph claimed to reveal faint outlines, shadows resembling walls, or the edge of a metal door. Debunkers noted these were algorithmic artifacts, not evidence, but in viral thumbnails, the image became a portrait of imprisonment, a man trapped within darkness, glimpsed only by machine vision. In 2024 and 2025, as renewed searches began using AI-assisted sonar mapping, fragments of hope reappeared. Malaysia partnered with Ocean Infinity to resurvey unsearched corridors of the Indian Ocean. But the digital world was elsewhere. On social media platforms like X, posts claiming Wood found alive went viral every few months, each time citing the same decade-old letter. The black photograph resurfaced again and again, reframed with new captions, new enhancements, and new interpretations. Some claim to have decoded hidden data in the image's binary structure, a cipher spelling out, "They took us." Others alleged that whistleblowers had smuggled survivors from Diego Garcia to secret rehabilitation sites. None of these stories contained verifiable evidence, but they maintained the emotional gravity of belief. Truth in the wreckage. As the hoax unraveled, attention turned to motive. Who had created the post and why? Some suspected it was a cruel joke made in the feverish first weeks of the disaster. Others believed it began as an experiment, a test to see how fast misinformation could spread when tied to real grief. The original uploader never came forward. The post's disappearance from 4chan archives deepened the mystery, ensuring the myth could never fully die. By 2018, after the release of the official MH370 safety investigation report, the consensus among experts was that the plane had flown south on autopilot for several hours after its transponder was switched off. The report found no evidence of interception, hijacking, or diversion to Diego Garcia. Analysis of the aircraft's satellite handshakes showed a steady descent until impact with the ocean surface, consistent with fuel exhaustion. The findings were based on independent data from multiple nations: Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, none of which supported any northern path. For the families, the report brought only partial closure. It explained the how, but not the why. The letter, though false, had given some of them temporary hope that their loved ones had survived. When that hope was stripped away, it left a deeper ache for Sarah Bajix, the partner of Philip Wood. The emotional whiplash was profound. She had once clung to the possibility of survival, even entertaining that he might be detained. But as years passed and evidence mounted, she redirected her fight toward demanding transparency from governments. She told reporters she still believed in intentional actions behind the disappearance, but no longer the rescue narrative. The internet, however, had moved on to preservation. Even after the hoax was exposed, the Philip Wood letter persisted across blogs, mirrored on countless conspiracy sites, and republished under new titles. The Man Who Tried to Warn the World, The Passenger. They couldn't silence. The story became self-sustaining. Whenever authorities issued new data, it was reframed as deception. Each debunk spawned a counter-theory. Meanwhile, oceanographers continued to uncover physical proof of the crash. In 2019, research by the CSIRO in Australia used drift modeling of surface currents and wind patterns to backtrack the paths of recovered debris. Their simulation pointed to a narrow region of the southern Indian Ocean, aligning with satellite arcs calculated by Inmarsat. The conclusion: MH370 had indeed gone down west of Australia, in one of the most remote stretches of sea on Earth. By 2022, over 30 confirmed or probable pieces of wreckage had been recovered. They came from Mozambique, Madagascar, Mauritius, South Africa, and Tanzania. Among them were flaperon fragments, wing panels, and cabin interior sections, each identified by Boeing serial numbers unique to MH370. No evidence pointed northward toward Diego Garcia. No unaccounted passengers were ever located. And yet, even with conclusive evidence, the legend endured. It had grown beyond data. The story of the letter had transformed into a cultural parable, a reflection of what happens when technology, trauma, and uncertainty intersect. Forensic truth could not erase the emotional power of mystery. In 2024, a decade after the disappearance, Sky News revisited the families. Sarah Bajix appeared once more, older, still grieving, still skeptical of governments, but resigned to the loss. In a quiet interview, she said, "We know they're gone, but we still don't know why." The mystery had contracted, from cosmic to human, from supernatural theories to bureaucratic failure and unanswered motives. That same year, new documentaries reignited attention by weaving fact with speculation. AI voice narrations resurrected the Philip Wood message, giving it cinematic weight. Videos claimed the photo contained steganographic text hidden in binary code, claims disproved within hours by data experts, yet watched by millions before takedown. Each reappearance reignited old debates, showing that the digital afterlife of MH370 was as endless as the ocean itself. At a technical level, every theory that once supported the Diego Garcia narrative had been systematically dismantled. Satellite pings confirmed a southern trajectory, radar coverage proved no northern deviation, and fuel consumption models eliminated the possibility of reaching any land. Even the supposed drone footage of the disappearing plane, once heralded as undeniable proof, was revealed through geolocation analysis to use assets from publicly available 3D animation software. It wasn't military footage at all, but a CGI rendering uploaded years after the disappearance, watermarked with false coordinates. Still, online believers claimed the debunking itself was staged. To them, exposure was simply further confirmation that the truth was being buried. The resilience of the hoax demonstrated a paradox of the modern age. The more evidence accumulates, the stronger disbelief can become. By 2025, technological forensics reached its final verdict. Image authenticity tools confirmed the original 4chan Philip Wood file was digitally tampered with, its GPS metadata inserted using open-source editors. There was no transmission from Diego Garcia, no authenticated cell phone signal, no chain of custody linking the image to any of the passengers. The message had been a fabrication, its power derived entirely from timing and desperation. In the renewed 2025 search effort led by Ocean Infinity, autonomous underwater vehicles combed regions identified by drift data. The expedition, equipped with deep-sea sonar and AI terrain mapping, focused on a 170-kilometer stretch along the 7th arc. The results, though not yet complete, represented humanity's persistent will to uncover the final truth. Truth grounded not in speculation, but in evidence. And yet, for all the progress, one question remained suspended. Why do people believe the unbelievable? Psychologists studying online conspiracy movements found that catastrophes with no closure, no wreckage, no remains, no clear motive, create a psychological vacuum. Into that emptiness flows the extraordinary. The letter, regardless of authenticity, offered narrative completion, a survivor's voice where there was silence, a location where there was void, a reason when there was chaos. The story of the Philip Wood message revealed as much about human nature as it did about technology. The hunger for meaning can transform even a hoax into hope. For the first generation raised in the digital era, MH370 became the defining mystery, a shared moment when the internet believed it could outthink governments, decode secrets, and rewrite history from bedroom screens. For journalists who covered it, the saga stands as both warning and epitaph. In an age where data can be altered with a few keystrokes, authenticity becomes fragile. The letter from the rescued passenger symbolized the fragility of truth itself, a parable of how quickly empathy can be weaponized and how easily digital evidence can shape mass emotion. Today, when visitors type Philip Wood letter MH370 into search engines, they find two parallel realities. One is a mythic narrative of survival and cover-up, the other a web of forensic reports proving fabrication. Between them lies the essence of the tragedy, the world's refusal to let the passengers simply vanish. In the end, the truth of MH370 was not hidden in a military vault or encoded in a black photograph. It was scattered across the Indian Ocean in fragments of aluminum and coral-covered wreckage, proof that the plane did not land, but fell. The message that captivated millions was not a voice from captivity, but an echo of human longing, amplified through the boundless circuitry of the internet. Even now, more than a decade later, every recovered fragment still carries weight. Each piece of debris is a message of its own, wordless, yet undeniable. This is where they were. This is how it ended. And though the letter was false, the silence it tried to fill was very real. For the families who still wait, truth is not enough. It is simply what remains when the last illusion finally fades. As the waves continue their slow, indifferent rhythm over the Southern Ocean, the story of Flight 370 endures as both mystery and mirror. The mysterious rescued passenger never existed, but the need for him to exist spoke volumes. It was never about Diego Garcia or secret technology or conspiracies in the clouds. It was about our fear of vanishing without reason and the comfort, however false, that someone, somewhere, might still be trying to send a message home. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.